Richard, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So Richard, when I talk to people about franchising or when people look at franchise opportunities, one of the first questions many people have is whether or not this is a quote unquote pyramid scheme. You know, it's very interesting. Franchising, direct sales, multi-level marketing, and pyramids, which are illegal, often have similar characteristics. And so it's important for experts like yourself to unpack the differences between those different types of enterprises. So exactly what is a franchise?
I like to describe the franchise business as a business in a box, in that the franchise business is typically a very established business that operates potentially in a variety of markets around the country. The franchisor has perfected the business model. The franchisor has certainly made their mistakes and learned from it. And the franchisor wants to grow by training and supporting others to do what his or her franchise has done in other markets. So it really proven business model. Unlike, somebody starting a business from scratch, you're essentially, learning as you go. Whereas with a franchise, you're getting all of that training up front so that you can hit the ground running, but you also have ongoing support, systems, processes, marketing know-how, software, and not the least of which is a camaraderie with the others in your system who can be a great resource for you. In terms of network marketing and those types of things, it really is sort of a different model altogether. But you're right, there is some sort of commingling in terms of the way people think about franchise businesses. But, as you mentioned before, franchises are predominant. There's thousands of franchise opportunities. I actually represent 600 of them. And, it's a wonderful business for really all types of people, but certainly somebody that wants to hit the ground running.
What kinds of franchises do you think are right now, given where we are today in the post-COVID environment, what kinds of franchises are the kinds of franchises you believe represent the types of opportunities, not so much the franchise itself, but in any sphere of work, in any category of business, there are the winners and there are the people that are still kind of evolving. What are some of the proven franchise models that you think people should take very seriously?
Generally, what I like to recommend to my clients is, look at what might appeal to you from a investment standpoint, from looking at your skills and background and education and desired lifestyle. Those are things to look at. But to answer your question more directly, I know through this pandemic, and people, probably understand this, is that some of the franchises that have really excelled are those home service related businesses. Businesses like painting and interior decorating and flooring. People were stuck at home, as we all know, and they are looking at their four walls and they say, gee, I need this work done. So those companies really did well during the pandemic. The restaurant industry, while many really struggled, those that were prepared to handle delivery and carry out and had apps and those types of businesses actually quite well in during the COVID era. So those are the two that fine. But as we go forward, really it really comes down to the individual and what their and interests and all the other things are.
That's a good answer. Let's go a little deeper into the franchise experience. We know that there's generally an investment on the front end that one has to make. As I've seen it, most franchisors want you to have a certain amount of cash available for operating. And then there's a fee that you generally have to pay either monthly, quarterly, annually to stay within, as it were, the franchise family. Talk a little bit more about those details.
Yeah, so when you invest in a franchise, there are several elements, obviously, to that initial total investment. The franchise fee is usually, depending on the franchise, is usually $50,000 and less, anywhere between $20,000 and $50,000. What that typically covers is the training, access to the systems, all of the trademarks, the buying power that the franchisor has that you can now take advantage of. Those are just some of the, that's what's included in the franchise fee. All of the other fees that would come with that, let's say it's a restaurant, equipment, build out of the physical location, those types of investments you would have to make whether you are a franchise or not. So really the franchise fee is the only thing that that's different than than somebody investing in their own startup business. Now ongoing, so really the franchisor doesn't really make any money off of the franchise fee because again, they're using that to train and support you. Where they make their money is through royalties. Typically, it's a percentage of the revenue that your franchise generates. And that's typically how the franchisor makes its money on an ongoing basis. Because of that, the franchisor is very incentivized by their franchisee's success. If you're not, as a franchisee, if you're not successful, then the franchisor is not going to be able to collect on royalties. So it's really a very symbiotic type relationship. If you win, I win. And that's one of the other things that I think makes franchising attractive to people that are investing in it, because they know that the franchisor is does do everything in their power to make you successful.
Yeah, that's great, because sometimes, all due respect, people that do what you do are so convincing about whatever opportunity that they promote or they manage, they can easily convince people who really should not be convinced. And I appreciate your honesty and transparency there. So
and let me just add to that, if I could, Dr. Soares. If I haven't done a good job of, really vetting the person as to whether or not they'd be a good candidate, the franchisors do not sell franchises, they award them. So they're doing a lot of the same things. They're very selective about who they bring into their system for the reasons that I mentioned before. They want you to be successful, but if you're not cut out, or they believe that you're not cut out for it, they're not going to award the franchise to that individual.
Sure. I know I promised I wouldn't take too much time, but I've got two other burning questions, and then I may think of a third or fourth.
Okay.
What I'm interested in knowing is this. As a franchise consultant, I guess in some ways, if I come to you because I know of your expertise and you've got these 600 franchise opportunities, in many ways, you would be working for me and for the franchises, correct? What would my expectations be of you as a franchise consultant?
Oh, excellent question. So my role is to really cut through those thousands of franchises that exist, get to know my client, to understand what opportunities I could recommend to them that I believe would interest them. So first and foremost, tailor, instead of that prospect or my client, going on the and getting overwhelmed by all of the opportunities, I can provide a more manageable list of opportunities. So it's my role to introduce the opportunity, give them a good overview of what the business is all about, introduce them to the franchisors that ultimately do interest them enough to want to learn more, help them understand the discovery process, and more than anything else, be completely unbiased, because I don't represent one brand, I represent 600 brands. So I'm not pushing any one particular franchise on anybody. That doesn't make sense, because as you mentioned before, everybody's different. Everybody has different interests, different investment level, and so on and so forth. So I'm really their advocate, or at least I like to feel like their advocate. And then I also can help assist them with identifying the funding that they may need in order to invest in the business. And I have lending partners that can help with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because accessing capital for business startups, for business expansion, is a very, very tough business. And you can't have good enough help if you're in business trying to access affordable capital and reasonable capital. Here's the question I wanted to ask you that may take you a bit beyond the normal scope of your work. And if it takes you too far, just tell me, talk to somebody else. But increasingly, I'm getting requests from people who have a pretty solid business. One is in your state, actually, South Carolina, and they're interested in franchising their business. Now, I think some are just pipe dreams, but I think it would be worth our while to really help people understand what they may need to consider if they think they have a business model that itself can be scaled by franchising. Do you have any perspective on that?
I do. As a matter of fact, even though that is not my area of expertise, I actually have introduced two small companies to a franchise development company who have helped them to grow through franchising. So, the things that those businesses would want to consider is, number one, are they running a successful business now?
Right.
That, those few franchises, when somebody does, start a franchise business, are difficult, because you don't have a big story to say that I have 100, 200, 300 franchisees. So you have to have a successful business. You have to have a duplicatable process. You also have to have the ability to divorce yourself from that business that you started in order to support your franchisees. And maybe it doesn't mean divorcing yourself, but certainly establish a staff that can support the franchisees so that they can grow. But yes, there are lots of ways to grow a business, as you know. Franchising certainly is one of them, and that is something that I do have experience with.
Well, that's good to know. Folks, this is Richard Weintraub. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you very much for your time as well, Dr. Shorties. Bye-bye.
Take care.